At 80, Jaclyn Smith can still look back at Kelly Garrett exactly as America first saw her. Kelly never aged. Jaclyn did. For 5 seasons of Charlie's Angels, she embodied elegance, beauty, and a kind of grace television seemed able to hold forever. But the woman behind the angel lived through broken marriages, painful losses, and a breast cancer diagnosis in 2002 that forced one frightening question: how much time would she still be given? The cameras could preserve Kelly. They could never protect what life would change around Jaclyn. Now, as Charlie's Angels reaches its 50th anniversary, the distance between 1976 and today feels impossible to ignore. Kelly is still young whenever an old episode begins. Jaclyn had to live everything that came after. So what does an ageless angel see when she looks back? What time took from her, or what life allowed her to keep? Before we begin, honor Jaclyn Smith with a like, a quiet tribute to the woman who kept living long after the screen stopped changing. Jaclyn Smith's first great dream had nothing to do with Hollywood. In Houston, Texas, ballet came first. Born Jaclyn Ellen Smith on October 26, 1945, she grew up with Margaret Ellen and Jack Smith, a dentist, in a family she would later remember with deep affection. "My childhood was idyllic," Jaclyn recalled. Her parents differed in temperament, but both were present, and the values of that home stayed with her long after fame arrived. She began dancing at 3, fell in love with ballet and classical music, and gradually built her earliest vision of adulthood around movement rather than cameras. At Trinity University in San Antonio, she studied psychology and drama and appeared in productions including Bye Bye Birdie and West Side Story. Acting still belonged to the edges of the future she imagined. Decades later, Jaclyn could describe that original plan in one simple sentence: "I thought I'd have a ballet school in Houston, Texas." The woman America would one day know as Kelly Garrett once expected something far quieter: to return home and build her life around the art she had loved almost from the beginning. At 19, she carried that dream beyond Texas. After roughly a year at Trinity, Jaclyn left for New York and lived for a time at the Barbizon Hotel for Women while pursuing dance. She studied ballet and widened her training toward musical theater, but getting closer to the profession changed what she wanted from it. The constant travel required of a ballerina did not fit the life she could see herself living. Years of training had pointed toward one identity. Jaclyn chose another direction. Ballet remained in her posture, discipline, physical control, and work ethic, even as it stopped being the destination. "I don't have any regrets about that choice," she would later say. The decision came without a public ending or dramatic farewell. A dream that had shaped her since childhood simply became a life she would never live. She had spent years preparing for ballet, only to discover that its greatest gift might be the discipline she would carry somewhere else. Houston grew heavier with time. Jaclyn's earliest memories remained attached to her parents, grandparents, brother, family dinners, and the people who had formed her first understanding of home. She spoke tenderly of a grandfather who lived to almost 102, and later of losing her brother, the one person who had carried many of those same memories from the inside. "He was that one person who knew what sitting at our family's dinner table was like," she remembered. Jaclyn had always understood that one day she would lose her parents. Her brother felt different. "I hoped to have my brother forever." Years later, aging gave her an even simpler truth. The worst part about aging is losing those valuable people that make your world go round. The ballet school in Houston never came. Some of the people who belonged to that first imagined future eventually disappeared from the table as well. What remained was the discipline they had helped shape in her. New York was about to test it in a profession with no choreography, no predictable progression, and no guarantee that being noticed would ever become the same thing as being known. Jaclyn had left Texas expecting to become a dancer. Soon, America would begin seeing her face everywhere, without yet knowing her name. For years, America saw Jaclyn Smith before it knew her name. An agent noticed her in New York, and commercial work opened the first dependable door. Print assignments, Listerine, beauty campaigns, and eventually the polished shampoo advertisements that placed her face before millions. She appeared uncredited in Goodbye Columbus, then played a journalist in The Adventurers in 1970. The role was small, but it gave her what advertising could not: a character to inhabit rather than an image to present. In 1971, she became one of the Breck Girls, and later worked as a Wella Balsam spokesmodel alongside Farrah Fawcett. Television appearances followed. By her mid-20s, Jaclyn was working steadily enough to remain visible without yet finding the role that would make viewers remember the woman behind the familiar face. Someone could recognize her smile from a commercial and still have no reason to know her name. Ballet had once offered discipline, repetition, and a progression she could understand. Screen work offered assignments, auditions, waiting, rejection, another opportunity, then more waiting. Jaclyn continued through all of it, carrying into an uncertain profession the patience she had once expected to spend at the bar. One audition in 1976 changed the scale of everything. Jaclyn entered Aaron Spelling's crowded office to read for Kelly Garrett in a new television project about 3 female private investigators. Farrah Fawcett was already familiar from their commercial work. Kate Jackson arrived with stronger television experience behind her. Jaclyn walked into the room without believing the role was waiting for her. After the reading, she was disappointed in herself. "I knew that audition wasn't my best moment," she later recalled. Then came an admission that makes everything afterward feel almost improbable. "I didn't think there was a chance for me to get Charlie's Angels." She left and mentally moved on. As far as Jaclyn was concerned, the opportunity had probably ended in that room. Then the phone rang. The producers were still considering her. Years of photographs, commercials, brief roles, and being recognized without truly being known had narrowed to one character she believed she had already lost. She had spent years learning how little certainty the screen could offer. Now that uncertainty was about to deliver the role that would divide her life into a before and an after. Within months, Kelly Garrett belonged to American television. The Charlie's Angels pilot aired as a movie of the week on March 21, 1976, with Jaclyn beside Kate Jackson and Farrah Fawcett. The weekly series followed on September 22nd. Jaclyn later remembered how uncertain those early days actually felt. A motorcycle she barely knew how to ride, a cold swamp during another sequence. 3 actresses making a pilot without understanding what viewers would soon make of them. The response changed their lives almost immediately. Jaclyn later said everything changed overnight. Kelly's warmth, restraint, and composure gave her a distinct place within the trio, and Jaclyn ultimately became the only original female lead to remain through all 5 seasons. The discipline learned in ballet had reached a destination she could never have imagined as a girl in Houston. The face that once appeared in shampoo advertisements was now entering millions of American homes every week, then magazines, posters, reruns, and popular memory around the world. Only months before Charlie's Angels, Jaclyn had believed Kelly Garrett was beyond her reach. Soon anonymity would be beyond her reach instead. She had spent years waiting for the world to notice her. Now she was about to learn what fame could change once the world refused to look away. When Charlie's Angels ended in 1981, Jaclyn Smith faced a problem success itself had created. America already believed it knew exactly who she was. Kelly Garrett had made her famous, and 5 seasons had fixed the character firmly in television memory. The challenge had reversed. Jaclyn no longer needed America to notice her. She needed room to keep growing beyond the woman viewers expected Kelly Garrett to remain forever. She moved into television films and miniseries rather than disappearing with the series that had defined her, eventually earning a Golden Globe nomination for portraying Jacqueline Kennedy. Kelly had opened the door, but Jaclyn still had to prove that one unforgettable role had not exhausted what she could do on screen. Then, in 1985, she stepped into territory even further removed from the expectations surrounding a glamorous television star: mass market fashion. She entered an exclusive licensing partnership with Kmart to create a women's collection, a move uncertain enough to make her hesitate. "Well, this is unknown terrain," she later remembered thinking. Kmart seemed far removed from primetime Hollywood, and the risk was obvious. The project could easily be dismissed as a celebrity attaching her name to inexpensive merchandise. Jaclyn chose to make the work behind that name matter. She involved herself in the details: fit, fabric, buttons, price, what women could realistically afford, and what they might actually want to wear again after bringing it home. Years later, she called the mass market business an education. Acting had trained Jaclyn to perform for an audience. Retail demanded a different kind of responsibility. A garment had to feel right on somebody else's body. A price had to make sense inside an ordinary household budget. A woman had to trust the name enough to return. What began with clothing eventually expanded into home furnishings, fabrics, wigs, beauty, and skincare products. While Smith's relationship with Kmart lasted roughly 36 years. Her official biography has said that more than 100 million women purchased clothing or accessories carrying her name over the life of the brand. By then, the collection had moved far beyond the novelty of a television star selling clothes. Women were returning to collections Jaclyn had helped shape, year after year, long after the first wave of celebrity attention should have faded. Her own rule for that longevity remained blunt: if you do it for the paycheck, walk away. Even after decades in retail, when another fashion chapter arrived in her 70s, Jaclyn spoke with the gratitude of someone who understood how rare sustained reinvention could be. You don't always get the second go-around. By then, her second act had already lasted longer than many first careers. Television had given her recognition. Business required judgment, repetition, affordability, and years of standing behind decisions carrying her own name. Kelly Garrett remained fixed in reruns, waiting exactly where television had left her. Jaclyn kept moving, from ballet to commercials, from television stardom to retail, from being recognized for appearance to being trusted for choices. She became one of the early Hollywood figures to turn celebrity licensing into a long-running mass-market enterprise, reaching women who had never watched Charlie's Angels when it first aired. The girl who once imagined teaching ballet in Houston had built a life across several different worlds without allowing any one of them to decide where the next one could begin. Keeping that sense of herself would matter far beyond work. Years before Jaclyn began placing her own name on businesses and collections, marriage had already shown her how easily she could begin losing sight of the person behind it. At 23, Jaclyn Smith entered her first marriage before she fully understood how quietly love could begin rearranging a person's sense of self. She married actor Roger Davis on November 29, 1968, years before Charlie's Angels would make her one of the most recognizable women on television. Their beginning moved with startling speed. Jaclyn later recalled that Davis proposed after only 2 dates. Looking back, she did not romanticize how little she knew about herself at the time. "I was such an innocent," she told People in 1978. The marriage came before Kelly Garrett, before worldwide fame, before the businesswoman who would one day debate fabrics, pricing, licensing, and contracts with confidence. Jaclyn was still discovering what she wanted from work, adulthood, and herself when she tied her future to another person. The marriage lasted until 1975. 7 years gave them history and a shared life. They also gave Jaclyn a realization she would later describe far more clearly than anyone observing from outside ever could. Somewhere along the way, devotion had begun taking up space that once belonged to her own identity. Jaclyn eventually put that cost into words, with startling directness. "I was too much living for him, and I lost sight of myself." She and Davis went to 2 marriage counselors as the relationship deteriorated. Jaclyn later remembered hoping someone would give her permission to leave, while the counselors kept returning the responsibility to her with one question: why do you stay? No counselor could make the decision she wanted someone else to make. Fame had not yet arrived to complicate the choice, and there were no children whose needs could determine what came next. She had to decide whether shared years and the effort already invested were enough reasons to remain inside a marriage where she increasingly struggled to recognize her own place. The union ended in divorce in 1975, only a year before Charlie's Angels transformed her public life. Within months, millions of strangers would learn Jaclyn Smith's name. Privately, she was still learning how to hear her own voice again. Years afterward, she and Roger Davis were still described as retaining friendship and affection. Ending the marriage did not require turning everything that had happened inside it into a mistake. What Jaclyn carried forward was less visible than a divorce decree, but far more important to the life that followed. The young woman who admitted she had lost sight of herself would eventually become remarkably deliberate about the work, decisions, and ventures that carried her own name. Kelly Garrett came next, followed by television films, business choices, fashion collections, and a brand that would endure for decades. Her first marriage became one of the earliest places Jaclyn learned that being loved, needed, admired, or attached to another person could never replace having a clear sense of who she was when that person was removed from the picture. The lesson did not spare her from future heartbreak. It did not guarantee that the next marriage would last. At 23, she had entered love believing devotion might be enough. 7 years later, she understood that staying connected to another person could never require disappearing from herself. The next relationship would test that lesson under conditions neither she nor Roger had faced. This time, Jaclyn would enter love as one of television's most recognizable women, and the man beside her would have to live with what happened when the world knew her name more loudly than his. Dennis Cole entered Jaclyn Smith's life on the set of Charlie's Angels, just as fame was making even ordinary privacy harder for her to protect. His guest appearance brought together two actors with established careers whose public visibility was moving at very different speeds. Jaclyn was becoming one of the most recognizable women on American television. Yet what stayed with her from the beginning was remarkably intimate. "I had butterflies in my stomach," she later remembered. Dennis wrote her a poem so spiritual that she compared the feeling it gave her to Elizabeth Barrett Browning. After 19 months together, they married in New York in 1978. Only 25 guests attended. Friends were contacted by telephone, decoy hotel reservations were made around the city, and their reception at Tavern on the Green was booked under false names. For a woman watched by millions each week, even getting married required an elaborate effort to keep one day from becoming public property. Afterward, Jaclyn said, "Without Dennis, my life would not have been complete, and now it is." She believed those words completely when she said them. Years later, remembering that certainty would be part of what made the ending hurt. As Charlie's Angels became a cultural phenomenon, Jaclyn remained the only original female lead through all 5 seasons. Dennis had a career of his own, but the press increasingly framed him through hers, at times reducing him to Mr. Jaclyn Smith. What had begun with poems, secrecy, attraction, and the hope of building a private life together now had to survive under a level of attention neither romance nor good intentions could easily control. Jaclyn later acknowledged that fame and professional imbalance contributed to the strain. "I tried with all my heart, but you can only try so much," she said. "I'm a dreamer, but you have to live in this world." Even after the marriage ended, she refused to turn Dennis into an enemy and said they remained friends. Yet when she looked back in 1985, the phrase she chose was aimed at herself. The divorce had left her with a strong sense of failure. Week after week, national television kept confirming how completely Jaclyn Smith had succeeded. None of that success could tell her how to save a marriage. Fame could enlarge a career, turn a face into an international image, and make one person's name almost impossible for the other to escape. At home, two people still had to find a way to remain themselves, while the outside world kept measuring one against the other. Their marriage ended in 1981, but some attachments formed during those years continued beyond the divorce. Dennis's son Joe, from an earlier marriage, had belonged to that former family circle. In December 1991, Joe died during a tragic incident in Venice, California, and the case remained unresolved. For Dennis, it was the loss of his only son. For those who had known Joe during that earlier chapter, it became part of a past whose consequences extended long beyond the marriage itself. Jaclyn's relationship with Dennis had begun with butterflies, a spiritual poem, elaborate secrecy, and her conviction that life finally felt complete. It ended first with divorce, then years later carried the memory of another loss, connected to a family world that had once seemed permanent. A decade separated the divorce from Joe's death, but memory does not always honor the distances marked by calendars. By then, Jaclyn had already entered another marriage and was moving toward the role that would alter the emotional center of her life more profoundly than television fame ever had: motherhood. Dennis had left her confronting what public success could do to the balance between two people who loved each other. With Tony Richmond, the question would become more personal. After two marriages had ended, Jaclyn would have to trust her judgment again, this time knowing that the life built from that choice would eventually include children as well as her own heart. By the time Jaclyn Smith met British cinematographer Tony Richmond while making Night Kill in 1980, two marriages had already left her questioning more than romance, her own judgment. Speaking in 1981, she admitted how much weight she placed on this new choice. "After two failures and a lot of fear and doubt about my judgment, he had to be special." Tony therefore represented more than husband number three. Choosing him meant trusting instincts Jaclyn had already begun to doubt. They married in 1981 with only 3 friends and their 3 dogs present. "I thought it should be just between Tony and me," she said, acknowledging that the ceremony felt emotional because she was not the blushing bride anymore. Soon, however, the marriage gave her what neither previous marriage had: children. Gaston Anthony was born in 1982, and Spencer Margaret followed in 1985. Jaclyn later described the period surrounding her first pregnancy as the best time of my life. Motherhood changed the order of a life that had once revolved around sets, scripts, and public schedules. While pregnant with Spencer, she said, "You don't want to be away. You don't want to miss a moment." Tony noticed the shift too. Even after 14 hours of shooting, he said, "Gaston came first." Contemporary profiles found the same pattern in quieter details: reading with the children, trips to batting cages, bicycles, parks, church, and ordinary family routines fitted around professional demands. Millions of strangers recognized Jaclyn Smith immediately. Gaston and Spencer knew a version of her that mattered more: the mother who kept coming home. That distinction became crucial when the marriage itself began to fail. Privacy became one of the few things Jaclyn could still control when Tony filed for divorce in 1989, seeking spousal support and joint custody. Public curiosity followed, yet this time, 2 children stood inside the story and could inherit whatever their parents allowed strangers to say about their family. Jaclyn could have answered every rumor or built a public argument explaining why the marriage had failed. She chose restraint. Speaking in 1991, she insisted that what had happened belonged between the 4 of us and no one else. Jaclyn had entered the marriage wondering whether 2 previous failures meant she could still trust herself. By the end, protecting Gaston and Spencer mattered more than making strangers understand exactly why the marriage had failed. She could live with strangers never knowing every detail if that privacy gave Gaston and Spencer more room to grow beyond the divorce. Gaston and Spencer eventually grew far beyond the divorce that had once surrounded their childhood. Gaston became a cinematographer, carrying forward the profession associated with his father. Spencer became a mother herself, and later worked beside Jaclyn on Spencer by Jaclyn Smith, a baby clothing line named for the daughter Jaclyn had once worked so carefully to keep beyond the harshest glare of public attention. Jaclyn said she could not have created the line without Spencer, and described it as a family project. Decades after the divorce, mother and daughter were creating a family venture under the same name. Tony and Jaclyn's marriage ended in 1989. The family story did not. Motherhood continued through childhood, adulthood, grandchildren, and eventually work shared across generations. Jaclyn never needed to prove that every choice she made had been right. When one of those choices failed, she protected what remained, gave her children room to grow beyond the breakup, and allowed the family story to continue beyond the marriage that had ended. By 1997, Jaclyn Smith had already watched 3 marriages end. Brad Allen entered her life through her father's medical care rather than a television set, and their relationship developed over 7 years before they married in Los Angeles on October 11, 1997. Spencer, then 11, served as maid of honor. 15-year-old Gaston gave his mother away. After 3 endings, Jaclyn still allowed herself to want permanence. "I want this one to be forever," she said before the wedding. Years later, Brad joked that a good husband learns when to say "I'm sorry" and admit when his wife is right, while Jaclyn pointed to "our morals and our values" as the ground beneath them. Their public glimpses together remained strikingly ordinary. Shared workouts, kisses between repetitions, teasing, laughter, and touch. 5 years after the wedding, that ordinary stability would face a fear no marriage vow could keep outside the door. A routine mammogram in 2002 changed the terms of Jaclyn's life almost immediately. She felt healthy and had not expected cancer. When she returned for the results, the doctor asked whether she was there by herself. She still assumed the question was routine. Then he told her the cancer was small and had been found early. Her first response cut through television, beauty, and every professional achievement that had once seemed important. "Will I be here for my children?" Gaston was 20, Spencer was 16. Panic pushed Jaclyn toward a mastectomy immediately. From the car, she called Brad and told him what she intended to do. He urged her to slow down, understand the diagnosis, and study the choices before letting fear make the decision. Jaclyn ultimately underwent a lumpectomy, followed by 8 weeks of radiation. Motherhood carried its own discipline through the uncertainty. "I can't let them see my fear. I've got to be strong," she remembered thinking. Her heart could be pounding, she explained, yet she still felt she had to remain the mother her children recognized. That same summer, she launched a furniture line, filmed a cameo for Charlie's Angels, Full Throttle, and began a recurring role on The District. Strength had become far more private, continuing to be a mother, a worker, and herself, while wondering how much future she would be given. Jaclyn did not go through 8 weeks of radiation alone. "I never went to an appointment alone," she later recalled. Her mother stayed close, her brother flew in, Brad helped her understand the medical choices, and her girlfriends took her to lunch, drove her to radiation, and arrived without waiting to be asked. The power of girlfriends, as Jaclyn called it, became part of how she moved through those weeks. Years later, she revealed one small habit that shows how deeply the diagnosis remained with them. Brad still accompanies her whenever she has a mammogram. The circle of care also extended beyond her household. Jaclyn had supported Kate Jackson around her breast cancer surgery, years before her own diagnosis. Decades later, she stayed connected to Cheryl Ladd when Cheryl faced the disease. Her philanthropy has included Susan G. Komen, the Breast Cancer Research Foundation, the John Wayne Cancer Institute, and the Farrah Fawcett Foundation. Then came a milestone nobody in the frightened weeks of 2002 could have promised. In 2024, Jaclyn and Brad marked their 27th anniversary in Paris, raising glasses at Bar Hemingway. 22 years after cancer had made tomorrow uncertain, Brad was still beside her. He still accompanied her to mammograms. Gaston and Spencer had grown into adults. Grandchildren had arrived. The future Jaclyn once feared losing had quietly become the life surrounding her. At 80, Jaclyn Smith is still moving forward rather than simply looking back. In April 2026, she reunited with Kate Jackson and Cheryl Ladd at Paley Fest in Los Angeles for the 50th anniversary of Charlie's Angels, returning to the television history that made Kelly Garrett part of American memory. Yet the reunion belonged to more than nostalgia. By August, Jaclyn was still actively working, with her fashion collection returning to HSN on August 13th, more than 4 decades after she first entered retail in 1985. Another project was drawing even closer. Her memoir, I Once Knew a Guy Named Charlie, is scheduled for publication on September 8, 2026. Jaclyn has said she wants readers to meet the girl behind the image, adding, "The truth of life is never as simple as its public version." For a woman whose face has been familiar to millions for half a century, the book requires a different kind of exposure, deciding which memories, losses, fears, marriages, and private parts of herself she is finally willing to put into her own words. Writing it has carried a weight no anniversary celebration could reveal. Jaclyn called the memoir the hardest thing I've ever done. She said she had gone to a deeper place, returning to losses and experiences she once kept beyond public view. Among them are her experiences with obsessive-compulsive disorder and what she describes as magical thinking, the feeling that thoughts might somehow influence other people or events. Even those closest to her have not heard every part of the story. Jaclyn has said some of what she wrote will be new to Gaston and Spencer, and to her 3 granddaughters. At 80, looking back, therefore, means more than remembering an iconic television role. It means revisiting parts of herself that remained private while America kept replaying the composed, eternally young image of Kelly Garrett. For decades, Jaclyn guarded the boundary between public life and family life. Now she is deciding, in her own time, how much of what lived behind that boundary she is ready to leave behind in words. Age has changed what Jaclyn calls beauty as well. Asked in 2026 for the secret behind her enduring appearance, she gave an answer far removed from Hollywood mythology: clean living, being loved. She pointed toward Brad, her children, and her 3 granddaughters. The simplicity of those words carries unusual weight after decades in which strangers examined her face, her figure, and the elegance that helped make her famous. In 2002, breast cancer forced Jaclyn to ask whether she would still be there for Gaston and Spencer. More than 2 decades later, both children are adults. Granddaughters have entered the family. Brad remains beside her. A 4th marriage that began after 3 painful endings is approaching 3 decades. Birthdays arrived that once seemed frightening to imagine. Children grew up. Grandchildren changed the family table. Work continued. In 2022, on their 25th anniversary, Jaclyn called Brad her best friend and partner in life, the man who kept her laughing through the ups and downs. The future she once feared losing never arrived as one dramatic victory. It accumulated quietly, 1 birthday, 1 anniversary, 1 family gathering at a time, until ordinary time itself became one of the greatest gifts she had been allowed to receive. Cancer changed Jaclyn's relationship with certainty. "It changes you forever," she once said. Fear became one part of a much longer story. Treatment ended. Mammograms continued, with Brad still accompanying her. Her children built lives of their own. Grandchildren arrived. Friendships endured illness and loss. Work changed shape. Memories accumulated faster than television could ever preserve them. Kelly Garrett remains waiting in 1976, whenever an old episode begins, untouched by age, disappointment, illness, divorce, or loss. Jaclyn had to live every year that followed, the marriages that ended, the relationship that endured, the children she tried to protect, the people she lost, the diagnosis that frightened her, and now the memories difficult enough that writing them down at 80 required her to return to places she had guarded for decades. Along the way, she kept becoming someone else, without ceasing to be the woman who came before. Ballet hopeful, commercial model, television star, actress beyond Charlie's Angels, businesswoman, mother, grandmother, cancer survivor, wife, and now memoirist. Time did more than add chapters. It changed what the earlier ones meant. Kelly Garrett made Jaclyn unforgettable, but longevity gave the story its meaning. The role that opened the door never became the whole room. 3 marriages ended before one lasted nearly 3 decades. The children Jaclyn once hurried home to became adults. Later came granddaughters, who now know a grandmother whose younger life still contains stories they have never heard. The diagnosis that once made tomorrow frightening sits more than 20 years behind her, while Brad still accompanies her to mammograms. A business career continued far beyond its first unlikely venture in 1985. And now, at 80, Jaclyn is putting memories onto pages that will remain after interviews, appearances, and anniversaries have passed. Beauty has gradually moved away from what strangers could see and toward presence. Who stayed, who grew up, who returned, who still sits beside her, and who will one day know her through the stories she finally chose to tell. Kelly Garrett stayed young because film preserved her. Jaclyn Smith grew older because life kept giving her years. And perhaps that is the greater gift: receiving enough time to change, to love, to lose, to rebuild, to understand parts of the past differently, and still be here when another chapter begins. If Jaclyn Smith still lives in your memories, leave her a tribute below, and wish her many more gentle years with the people she loves.